This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone. When I unmuted myself early and was singing the intro song like I always do to set my sound levels. Ah. Welcome to the Sunday stream, the stream I do on Sundays, because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays. Hope you're all doing well this wonderful Sunday morning in the wonderful world of wonderful worlds. And oh my gosh, Keeverdam, before things even start, I, Vercingetorix, in chat, said that you should reach out to PSA Stitch or Adam Friended about coming onto their stream. Or maybe Caffeine Tweaker can hook you up with them if you message her on Twitter. They do CRT stuff. Well, okay. I've heard of Stitch. I've heard of Adam Friended. I honestly have never heard of Caffeine Tweaker. You know, it always sounds like I'm... I should say an aside here. When I started watching commentator channels and things, and especially around the time that Gamergate started, people started doing like fan art of the Gamergate crowd fighting against the anti-Gamergate crowd, and it was all this amazing fan art. And I only knew these people by their handles and their avatars, and it always looked like superheroes fighting against supervillains and that kind of thing. And I, from time to time, I still fall into that mindset of seeing someone's name or a handle or whatever, and I just think I'm talking about superheroes like the Caffeine Tweaker versus Adam Friended, that kind of stuff. That's just where my mind goes. I'm more than happy to do streams with whoever wants to talk about stuff if I have something to offer. That's my only sort of hesitation is that when I'm going up against people who are either more academically trained in this stuff or make a focus of it more so than anything else, my hesitation is always, I hope I'm not a third wheel. That's all. But if you want to link me up with people or start conversations, I have absolutely no problem with that. I appreciate it. So sure. The answer is sure. And thank you, Keeverdam, for that very generous donation. I really appreciate it. And speaking of which, Keeverdam, our Den Mother moderator here, she's offered, as always, the GoFundMes to our friends Shady Grin, Angry Illinoisian, and his kitten. They're pinned to the top of the chat box. If you would be so kind as to take a look at those when you have an opportunity, their family, and their friends could certainly use your help if you have a moment. But before we get into all that, who else is joining me on this beautiful Sunday morning? Matt Barnes, Jaeger Pony, Noah Asensio, Funtime Bats, Some Namnyon Nation, Toku, Johnny Hellcat, Chicago Mike, and who else is here? Anybody else? J2022, Insulted 25. Oh, you've only been insulted 25 times. You're a lucky person. Exhumed Legume. Hello. Shiro Amada. Spudgun. And I think that's everybody I see. No, wait, there's somebody else here. JJ Konzi 2. JJ Konzi 2? Konzi 2 for you. So with that, what are we doing today? Well, I had planned on doing something different, but then the gods of audio decided to screw everything up. There was this hour-long presentation from the Harvard University College of Business talking about diversity hiring. I was like, ooh, Harvard. That sounds exciting. And then I listened to the audio. I mean, I don't watch these things ahead of time, but I do try to clean up the soundtrack a little bit for presentation's sake. So I end up listening to 5 or 10 seconds just to make sure everything sounds all right. And this lady was on a webcam, and it was terrible. And I spent an hour, not even kidding, I spent an hour looking up techniques to try to clean up muffled sound or tinny sound from a webcam using Audacity, the sound program I use. And it just wasn't happening. And it wasn't happening. I was like, oh, and I made a thumbnail for it and everything. I was like, oh. So I was like, okay, well, what else might be interesting? What else can I find that might be interesting? Before I get into that, Mike R., thank you so much. Ahem. Hi, Scribe. Did I miss you, Mike R.? I apologize. Thank you, Mike R. Miker. A tall person, hello. So what did I find otherwise? And Jamie Melquist, hello. I came across a little company called Praxis Recruitment, and a very enthusiastic and happy lady who wanted to talk about diversity hiring and inclusion and all types of stuff. And now I actually have 3 videos here. They're all relatively short. I think combined they make up about 20 minutes or so, 22 minutes, something like that. And I'll be presenting them in the order they were posted on the YouTube channel. I have not watched them yet, but they deal with diversity hiring, but in Canada. Now, here's the thing. I'm not averse to doing videos about things happening in other countries necessarily, but I always get a little hesitant if it's going to be talking about a subject where perhaps the culture or the laws involved are far outside of my experience. And I'm kind of like, do I want to do something on Canada about diversity hiring when I don't know how Canadian law operates, etc.? And so, I decided to look up Canadian law. So let's read that real quick as to what pertains to employment discrimination in Canada. This is from the Canadian Human Rights Act from RSC 1985, whatever that means. And the purpose of the act, short title, 2. The purpose of this act is to extend the laws of Canada to give effect, within the purview of matters coming within the legislative authority of Parliament, to the principle that all individuals should have an opportunity equal with other individuals to make for themselves the lives that they are able and wish to have, and have their needs accommodated, consistent with their duties and obligations as members of society, without being hindered in or prevented from doing so by discriminatory practices based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, with a U, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, marital status, family status, genetic characteristics, disability, or conviction for an offense for which a pardon has been granted or in respect of which a record suspension has been ordered. Okay, so there you go. Those are the things that you are verboten from considering, amongst other things, when thinking about giving somebody a job. So that's where it's at. It's actually a bit more comprehensive in language than the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as far as those things you have to keep in mind. But all the same, more so, more expanded. So that's where we're coming from in Canada. Now, I had thought that perhaps I'd sing the Canadian national anthem to start us off. But I think that would take too long, and you guys wouldn't enjoy it all that much. If you really want me to sing the Canadian national anthem, let me know by the end of the show, and I will close out with my rendition. But ahead of all of that, let's get into it. So, yes, this is 3 videos. There'll be a little break in between each, and we'll pause to consider what we've heard otherwise. And this is from Praxis Recruitment out of Canada. All right, so a couple seconds for sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear it, and then we will proceed.
Hello from Praxis Recruitment. I'm Christina Stewart.
Okay, you hear Christina Stewart. And unfortunately, all the videos have subtitles. So even if for some reason the audio isn't to your liking, you can still, tell what's going on. Let's see. Who's saying what about... Okay. I make a comment about color. Spudgun, Scriblight, color with a U. That's because they know how to spell properly. Okay, you commies and your U's and your metric system, just no. Okay, and Mike R sounds good. Some emulation says sounds echoey. Well, that's because it was recorded in a room. I can't do anything about that. All right, so Christina Stewart, and today she wants to talk to...
And today I want to talk to employers about diversity.
I am so excited that you're excited.
Let's bring some diversity into your work environment.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to talk about today is 6 ways that you are not doing that.
6 ways. Man, if we had the bingo card out, we'd have a list already. Okay, 6 ways. Okay, so I'm going to pretend I'm an employer in Canada. I run a maple syrup factory. There you go. I run a maple syrup factory. Okay, what are things that I'm not doing to enhance diversity in my maple syrup factory? I'm more than happy to find out. Thank you, Matt Barnes. Oh, Canada, you sultry temptress. That's not how it goes, Mike, or Matt, sorry. I got Mike R on the brain for some reason. I wonder why that is. Thank you, Matt Barnes. All right, what are 6 ways that I'm not doing that?
6 ways that the way that you are recruiting, your recruitment processes are limiting diversity in your organization.
Okay, well, I am ready to learn what I should not be doing.
All right, number 1, you haven't prioritized it.
I guess that would be an impediment to diversity if I didn't make it a priority. Sure. Okay.
If you haven't taken the time to think about what a diverse work environment looks like for you, how you might bring a diverse set of employees into your organization, if you haven't incorporated diversity as part of your employer brand and therefore your attraction plan, you're not going to be attracting a diverse set of employees into your organization.
Okay, well, I know it's probably going to be a futile effort to do so, but I would ask, how do you define diversity? That's the thing, is that she says what diversity looks like to you. Well, that if it's all subjective, then what if I'm fine with the way my company is? And you came in and said that I was wrong. So are you going to define diversity? I'm curious to find out. A couple more late hellos. Mike Savage, Blarg. Brett Ide, hello. And anybody else? Brittany Holland, hello. All right. So let's assume that I don't know what diversity means in the business world. Will you tell us?
I've said it before, I'll say it a million times again. The best way to start in terms of creating diversity in your work environment is looking at the community in which you work and making sure that your employee base is reflective of where you live.
Oh, okay. So what I would need to do then to do that effectively would be to have some kind of demographic breakdown of the population in my local area. I mean, should that be my city or my county? I mean, how far afield should I put this net to figure out the demographic spread? But either way, okay, so I have to have my workforce reflect the community in which we work. So that means I have to have a quota system, right? Because if I have too many people of one type that is outside the demographic spread of where I work, then I'm breaking the rule, right? So I have to have very strict quotas on how many people from whatever demographics I include in my workforce in order that, it reflects the community. Now, what mechanisms would I have to put in place in my hiring practices to ensure that I had the correct demographic spread that my workforce reflects the community? What would I have to do to achieve such a thing if that was the limitation on my choices? I don't know. What would I have to do? Are you going to tell us what I'd have to do?
And so taking the time to sit down and do that from the outset, incorporate diversity into your employer brand, is an excellent way of ensuring that it becomes a priority, and therefore you're attracting a diverse set of employees into your organization.
No, you're not talking about attracting. You're talking about metering. You're talking about, there's a word. There's a word for when you put something ahead of another. God, I can't think of it right now. For some reason, it's just not coming. I need her to tell me. But yeah, it's attracting. Okay, well, how do I attract people? How do I work that into my brand? Right, what does that look like exactly? I mean, if I'm a maple syrup company, how do I incorporate diversity into my brand if my brand is the product?
Okay, that was number 1. Number 2, let's talk about referral programs.
Okay.
Referral programs. I'm a huge fan of referral programs.
I can tell you're very enthusiastic about referral programs,
where you get your employees to refer other employees into your organization.
Oh, okay. And this is all towards the end of diversity. Who should I hope that they refer to me?
I talk about it a lot in terms of working rurally and remotely around our province. in terms of finding people to work in your work workplace is asking your employees to send in friends and family, right?
I suppose if you're, desperate for workers, or you have trusted employees who can vouch for somebody else. I've seen some issues with bringing friends and family into the office place, especially if they're working in the same area. I usually want to keep some kind of separation, and definitely want to avoid any kind of nepotism. But then this is Canada, so I guess everybody's much more friendly about that. I don't know.
So it's fantastic for finding employees, but it's terrible for creating diversity in the work environment.
Oh, of course, because obviously if someone who works for you is going to refer someone to you, that person is going to be exactly like they are in some fashion, right? And then that's not diverse, because if I know someone, like someone in my family, like if I were to refer Sister Scribe to my employer as a potential candidate, obviously, he wouldn't want to even think about it, because she's exactly the same person as I am, right?
Why is that? Because, your friends and your family are similar to you.
Oh, yeah, they're similar to me. Yeah, in what ways are they similar? What similarities do you speak of that are to be avoided in the family friends referral program? My friends are similar to me in what fashion? What do you assume? What do you assume to know about my friend base, and what informs you of that, might I ask?
If I brought entirely my friends and family into my organization, it would be exactly the same.
Really? Really? Everyone in your friend group and your family is a clone of you? Is an exact copy of you? Is that how that works? Or was it, well, I guess it depends on how you're assessing same. I mean, obviously they're not the same people as you, right? I mean, they have different ideas, different names, different passions, different histories and backgrounds and growing ups and everything, right? So there must be some, I don't know, some kind of common denominator you're referring to, without so far actually referring to it. What could that be? What could be the unifying truth of you, your friends, and your family that would be something to be avoided if the goal is diversity? What would that be? Would you tell me? Would you elucidate me on that?
We have the same values and interests and so forth.
Really? You and your family and friends collectively have the same values and interests and so forth. Really? What? Canada must be boring if everybody that knows anybody else shares the exact same values and interests. Because she's not just talking about her close family, she's talking about her friends. So anybody even outside of her own family group. Wow. God, okay. That's what you're basing that on. So because your friends and family have the same values and interests, right? Your employer would not want to hire them because of sameness. Because since you, obviously, I mean, if they're accepting a referral from you in the first place, or would be willing to, entertain it, they must value you as an employee, right? So why wouldn't your employer want several more of you working for them? Maybe I'm missing something here. I don't know. Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. This stream brought to you by Scribes Maple Syrup Company. We are Legion. Man, I'm getting such twinges to try to figure out an ad campaign for my own maple syrup company now, like the old days with Lords of the Night. Like, what would I call my maple syrup company? Oh man, now I got to think about that. Thanks, Johnny. You put that seed in my head. Appreciate it. All right. So yeah, your employer definitely wouldn't want more of you around.
And so, yes, good for bringing in employees, terrible for diversity. So yeah, it's okay to have a referral program.
But
in fact, I recommend it. But in terms of creating diversity in your work environment, you want to make sure that you're limiting the use of it, that isn't your entire recruitment plan to use referrals.
I mean, I obviously do not know the hiring practices of every business on the planet, but I would be surprised, short of perhaps the mafia, if any business relied wholly on referrals for their recruitment or employment practices. I'd be surprised.
Okay, number 3, let's talk language in job postings.
Oh boy.
If you aren't using neutral language in your job postings, you can be turning people off from applying. And I'll give you an example.
An example? Oh my God. And I'm only, I mean, I'm being a little bit melodramatic, but I'm not being facetious when I say, if you actually give me an example of neutral language or non-neutral language in job postings, I think you'll be the first. I am hard-pressed to think of a time in any other video I've done where they brought up the subject that they actually ended up telling us what that looks like. So if you are going to give us an example, you are a rare breed. Oh, please, please.
If I say I'm looking for a rock star sales manager,
then that means people who see that aren't themselves rock stars won't apply. Please don't tell me if your response to that is people look at that and say, well, I'm not a rock star in real life. Don't tell me that that's your example.
I might be turning off a whole demographic of people.
What demographic is that?
If I say...
No. Oh, you were so close. You were so close. What demographic is going to be turned off by that language? What demographic? Like what country western fans? What are you talking about?
Things like sympathetic or confident or any of these sorts of words.
Which words? If I say things like sympathetic or confident, like how? I feel like I'm on a spelling bee or something. Can you use that word in a sentence as relates to a job posting?
They do have masculine and feminine connotations to them.
What? Wait, what? Hold on. If I say things like sympathetic or confident or any of these sorts of words, they have masculine and feminine connotations. So which am I supposed to assume is the masculine or feminine of those two examples that you gave? Which would you say are the masculine and feminine connotations? And if you say that, I'll tell you who's the sexist.
So what we want to be doing is when we're writing the job postings, making sure that we're really limiting the use of those sorts of words. Stick to the facts, keep it simple. This is the educational requirement. This is the experience that I'm looking for. This is the organization, and leave it at that.
Uh-huh. So I have to avoid using the words sympathetic and confident. I mean, those are the only examples you've given so far. And rock star. I'm assuming rock star was the element of your first example that I have to avoid. That's going to turn off, I don't know, harpsichord fans or something. Okay. If I use sympathetic or confident, I'm going to alienate whole swaths of the population from applying to my job posting. Okay.
Make sure that you are keeping your job postings as neutral as possible because you want to be attracting a wide variety of applicants into your work environment. You don't.
Well, what if I'm looking for someone who is sympathetic? What if I need someone to deal with customers? Right? What if I'm looking for somebody to do customer relations? If I put in keywords that, will more often than not click with people who either believe that they have those qualities or just inherently know that they have those qualities. If I say something like, we're looking for a people person, right? Okay, well, is that going to turn off somebody who has social anxiety? Yes, it probably will. You know, do I want someone with social anxiety being my customer relations person? Probably not. Do I want to waste time interviewing someone who has crippling social anxiety for a customer relations position if I can passively avoid it ahead of time by sort of broadcasting to potential applicants what is and is not a desirable, facet of someone's personality for this job? Probably. But okay, you want to, for a job opening that isn't just an entry-level position kind of thing, you want to cast as wide a net as possible. You don't want to get down to a specialist. Okay.
You don't want them to glance at your posting and think, oh, that doesn't fit for me.
Why not? If it doesn't fit for them, then maybe it would be better that they look for a job elsewhere. Not every job is made for every person. And if you're the employer and you don't want to waste time interviewing people who are obviously not going to be a fit because it's not work that they would be interested in. If I kept a job posting 100% neutral, it would have to be something like Scribes Maple Syrup Company, job opening, apply here. I mean, that is about as neutral as I could get. And the job requirements, what if I said something must be able to must be able to read and write both English and French, right? What if I did that? What if I had that in my Canadian maple syrup company? All right. Well then obviously I'm completely lining out anybody who just has a single language in their quiver, right? Well, that's not fair, is it? But then I get somebody who, if I leave that out, and I get somebody who applies that only speaks one or the other, but I need both, well, whose time is wasted? Both of ours. This sounds like you're creating a lot more work for the employer and the human resources department than are necessarily have to be there if you just sort of like be specific in what you're looking for in your job posting.
I'm not, that's not me. Right? You want people to see it and think, oh, well, maybe that's of interest to me.
Not at the expense of having a whole bunch of people who are inherently unqualified or not desirable to come in because they don't have the skills or the interest in the subject that you're promoting. I am sure that there is a way someone could put out a job posting that is so ridiculously detail-oriented and stringent that, yeah, you'd have almost nobody applying for it. And that would probably be to the detriment of the employer, sure. But the examples you've given make absolutely no sense as something I'm supposed to, or this rule, neutral, true neutral job posting. Okay.
Right? So that was number 3, language. Number 4, let's talk about unconscious biases.
Oh boy, I love unconscious biases. They're so ephemeral.
I have an entire playlist on YouTube around unconscious biases that we have at work.
Really? What? Okay. I usually have playlists of songs or true crime videos, but hey, to each their own.
If you have a brain, you have biases, and they're showing up in your recruitment program.
Oh, okay. So what are yours? I mean, you have a brain. So what are yours? You going to tell us?
So you want to check those. Check out those videos and take a look at yourself and see, oh, you know what? I've done that in the past. Think to yourself about why you're making the decisions that you're making in terms of recruitment is the perfect first step to making sure that you are taking a look at what biases you might have, what you display. So it starts with you taking a look and thinking, okay, well, why did I not hire this person, but I hired this person?
I don't know. One person had the skills necessary and the other didn't. Or maybe I got so caught up in neutralizing my job posting that I decided to add a sexual connotation to certain adjectives. I don't know. Or maybe to assume that men are confident and women are sympathetic and ne'er the twain shall meet. Or something. Like that kind of unconscious bias.
Why wasn't I interested in this resume? And instead I'm interested in this resume. So making sure that you're doing that in terms of checking your unconscious biases will actually expand your diversity in your work environment.
What if my unconscious bias is choosing someone right for the job rather than someone who isn't? I mean, there is going to be bias in a hiring situation because you're looking for someone to fulfill the role necessary. Biases are not inherently bad. Checking my biases. Yeah, okay. You want to get any more specific on that one?
For sure. Along that note, number 5, let's talk about your recruitment team.
My recruitment team. Okay. What about my recruitment? It's not going to be something along the lines of your recruitment team should also be diverse because you don't want the same line of thinking in the whole room, because obviously if you resemble each other, you all have the exact same opinion. Something like that.
Maybe it's you, maybe there's a bunch of people, but if they're all the same, if there's a lack of diversity in that recruitment team, you are not going to be engaging in and bringing diverse employees into your organization.
Define diverse. What makes a diverse employee? What are you talking about? I have no illusions that she's going to define her terms here, but it's always my big question. When you say a diverse employee, what makes a diverse employee versus a same employee? And if I have same employees in my company already, shouldn't I fire them? All right. Thank you, Matt Barnes. My unconscious bias is towards Canadians. They had a weird hockey team that played on grass with a white spherical puck in Montreal, and everyone knows Vermont maple syrup is far superior. If you have a bias toward Canadians, why do you think Vermont maple syrup is superior? What? You're confusing me, Matt Barnes. Are you a hiring agent? Are you a Praxis recruitment practitioner?
You want to make sure that the recruitment team, the people who are recruiting or making decisions around selection, certainly come from a different viewpoint, that they have a different lens, that they have different things that they value and that they're looking for, different backgrounds and experience, and making sure that they themselves also are checking their unconscious biases.
Maybe I have a recruitment team made up of people who are at least somewhat directly involved in the same type of work as the person I'm trying to find for this job. So, for example, you have the HR person, right? And then you have one of the senior employees in that department. For example, I have been involved in situations where I have been sitting in on job interviews, right? Because there's the HR person, and then I happen to be somebody who works in that department that they're hiring for. So I already know the work. I already know what's necessary to get the job done. And so I have some insight as to what questions to ask or what to look for and so on as the interview is taking place. So it has to do with the merit I possess from being in the job. Right? Now, obviously, no one's a mind reader. This is the one thing that no law or anything else will ever be able to conquer. If someone has some deep-seated hatred of a particular type of person, but they never say it out loud, and they never write it down, you can never know for sure, right? I mean, laws and rules and such only go so far. But, yeah, what does that say about you when you say everybody's the same and has the same outlook and so on? What are you hiring for? Your recruitment team? I don't know. Is this good advice? I'm asking honestly. I don't run a business. Right? I mean, I've been involved in a couple of businesses as an employee to the point where I've, in some quasi ways, ended up becoming management or something sort of. But is this actually good advice? Is this something that makes any sense to anybody?
So even if you're in a tiny little organization where it's kind of just you looking at who you're bringing into your organization, get a manager to support you. Get somebody else to take a look.
Yeah, like somebody from the department. It has to do with what they know about the job. What does my life experience have to do with it? It's interviewing for a job. Can you do the job? Do you possess the skills necessary? Are you available in your schedule to do it? Are there any encumbrances to your life or situation that might otherwise make this a problem? And so on.
That brings a different perspective into your screening process, certainly.
What kind of perspective? Okay, what perspectives are necessary to do a correct job in finding for diversity? Dare I ask for an active example? Like, I am hiring for job X, so I want to have what perspectives? And what defines someone's different perspective exactly? Because apparently if anybody from your family or friend group comes to your company, they're not going to have any different perspective on the world, people, or work than you do somehow. How do you know this? What kind of differences do I need to apply to my recruitment team in order to make it correct? What filters, what biases shall I employ to create the perfect recruitment team?
In terms of taking a look at those resumes that come in and then deciding whether somebody could or couldn't move forward in the process into interview. And then certainly, as I mentioned, through that selection process, making sure that you've got some diversity in your recruitment team.
You keep saying that word, but you don't define it. You need to define it.
Okay. Last one, number 6. Let's talk about fit. Hire for fit.
Hire for fit. I do hear that a lot. What does that mean?
Let's hire for cultural fit. We want to hire for fit.
Yeah, cultural fit. I did a video a long time ago where it was promoting the whole bring your whole self to work philosophy. And at the very end, the president of the company, I think it was, he came on in this promotional video and he said, if he said something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing, if you're not in with our cultural philosophy on bringing your whole self to work, then you probably don't want to work here. Yeah. Okay. So like that kind of philosophy.
We hear it all the time. Yeah, it's important that somebody fit in your organization. But if you're limiting yourself to making sure that people aren't going to rock the boat, making sure that people are replicas, that is exactly the opposite of diversity.
What if I just want somebody to do their job? Right? What if it's like, I have a position open. The position is to do this thing every day and get this thing done. Why would I want to leave the door open for someone to come in and rock the boat, especially if it's their first job with the company? Someone who's been there several years and knows people and knows the business and has some leeway in some things. You can earn that kind of position over time, especially if you don't do anything destructive. But why would I want to leave the door open for someone to rock the boat in my company?
And I mean diversity in terms of not just the protected grounds of race and religion and family status.
Oh, you don't? Really? Well, what do you mean?
And all of those sorts of things, but I mean diversity in personality, diversity in where they come in terms of experience and education and so forth.
Oh, so you're talking about diversity of merit as well? Oh, because I wasn't sure about that, because you said that everybody in your family and your friend group would be persona non grata to be hired because that doesn't reflect diversity. But then again, I'm assuming that no one in your family and friend group all together have the exact same educational background, work experience, and so on. But so that would make them different, wouldn't it? That would make them diverse outside of the sort of cursory surface level things like race and gender and religion and so on. You're very much confusing me. You're very much confusing me. Thank you again, Matt Barnes. You can strive for diversity all day, but whoever applies. Well, see, now I have a theory on that. I'll be curious to see if she brings it up, and if she doesn't, I'll I've mentioned it before, having gone through the Hive diversity routine and several other diversity recruitment consultants and programs over the last couple of years on this channel. I have a theory as to how you can strive for diversity and achieve it, but it requires a little bit of, I'll get to it.
So yes, I get it. You want to hire fit. I think it's really important that people can kind of row the boat in the same direction.
Yeah, like coming to work on time and doing your job. I mean, yeah, it's that is an admirable, attitude to have in a company that is there to make a profit.
In terms of moving your organization forward.
Yeah.
But what we know is when there is diversity in your work environment, your workplace is 35 times more likely to be productive.
35 times? Wow. Okay. So if I bring in people who are not rowing in the same direction, if I'm bringing in people who are there to rock the boat amongst people who are there to row in the same direction, I'll be 35 times more productive, even if the oars aren't all going in the same direction. Your analogies are lacking. They really are.
Profitable and motivated and all of these wonderful things. Through that little bit of conflict, and I mean workplace conflict that's a healthy, where people might come in and challenge ideas in terms of, hey, well, why are we doing it this way? Let's think about doing it that way. When we can bring in that healthy workplace conflict, what we know is we get innovation, and that innovation leads to higher productivity, profitability, motivated employees, retention, all the rest of it comes along with it. Just like that? Just, okay, because I want to introduce conflict into my workplace? I mean, if we're having a brainstorming session over how to deal with an issue or something, then sure, but not as like a matter of course. I guess it depends on the business. It really does. There are a lot of business-specific elements here that obviously aren't being covered. This sounds like a more productive work environment, encouraging workplace conflict. Didn't you? You said something earlier about word choice and language used. This doesn't sound very attractive. If I'm running my maple syrup company, I don't want conflict. I want people making maple syrup. We know this, and that's why I'm having the conversation today, because we know that diversity is incredibly important, and not just from an employee happiness perspective, but also from a bottom line operational perspective.
Well, you're saying that, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of proof of that. Employee happiness. Okay, well, if I'm supposed to be hiring people into my workforce on the basis of the community that surrounds it, and really the only mechanism by which I can achieve such a thing is to, if I'm being literal about it, and I can't imagine you're not being literal about it, is to hire on the basis of demographic spread, then I have a quota system, which means that many people are going to be hired first and foremost specifically because of something they possess beyond their own talents or merits. Is that a happiness situation? Is it a happy thing to know that someone got a job first and foremost because they look the part?
All right. So those are the 6 ways that you want to make sure that you are not doing in terms of creating a recruitment plan or process in your organization. Diversity is essential to a well-functioning team. And so there's some tips and tricks for you.
Is it well-functioning to have someone in who rocks the boat, challenges everything that's going on, and rows in a different direction? Okay.
Hopefully that was helpful. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to the newsletter, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have any questions at all, or you have a question that you want me to answer in a video, then please send me an email directly, Christina@praxisrecruitment.ca. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.
Well, I obviously have a lot of questions. abstractly. And I realize this was a very short video. It's not exactly a lecture or anything, but define diverse employee. If you have two people in a room, let's say, here's a question for you. Let's say our speaker, and I don't know, maybe she does. Let's say she has a twin sister, okay, and I put both of them in the room. All right. And one of them is already an employee, and I'm thinking about filling another job, and I have the sister there. Is the sister a diverse candidate? Yes or no? If I were to say to this sister, I can't hire you because you're exactly the same as your sister, what conversation would that spark, do you think? I don't know. Septus Wolf, I want to be employed at Scribelight's Maple Syrup Factory so I can start a maple syrup food fight and cause chaos. Yes, rock the boat in my sticky factory. Okay, now that I've said that out loud, it sounds like something that's like some kind of innuendo thing. And if you weren't thinking that way before about it, you just are now, and that's your fault. That's your dirty mind. Okay, moving on to the next video.
Hello from Praxis Recruitment. I'm Christina Stewart.
Hi, Christina.
And today I want to talk about people's names.
Oh.
Employers, please use real names for employees.
Yeah, don't call your employees Slick or Kid or Bucko. Yeah, real names are all right. Using proper names. Again, I just grabbed these videos in sequence from the YouTube channel. I don't know what's being discussed. All right, let's talk about names. Say my name, say my name.
And what I mean by that is if you see a resume come in and it says Mike Smith,
yeah,
but for example, maybe it's Mike and then in brackets Muhammad Smith,
then they don't mind being called Mike. Then they're fine with people calling them Mike because they put that on their own resume. There's an implication there that they're fine. Maybe they prefer Mike, but they have to put down their legal name. You could find that out in the interview. Do you prefer Mike or Muhammad? I mean, maybe he doesn't like Muhammad for some reason. Who knows? Maybe he's more comfortable with Mike. You could find that out by talking to the person and not making assumptions. I know it's a crazy idea.
Please use Muhammad. I think that when people come to Canada, they give up so much, and it makes me sad to think that they have to give up their names.
Why don't you talk to the individual first without assuming to know their attitudes or backgrounds? I know that's a crazy thought. That's a really crazy thought. But maybe not. Weren't you talking about unconscious biases a minute ago? Okay, well, tell me more. Tell me more about what you assume to know about people coming to Canada. I mean, you may be right in some situations, right? But that is an assumption on your part. Why don't you get to know the individual? When people come to Canada, they give up so much, and it makes me sad to think that they have to give up their names too. Well, if it makes you sad to think that way, guess who has the most control over how you think? Right? Unless you're, a citizen of China or something. I think that when people come to Canada, they give up so much, and it makes me sad to think that they have to give up their names too. They give up their families. What? They give up oftentimes their culture, their comfort with their home, and often their language. Often? How often is often? Honestly, okay, and this is one of those points at which, like I was talking about at the beginning, where I kind of hit a sort of a cultural wall, because I don't know all that goes on in Canada with immigration or people coming to Canada. I'm sure that people who live in Canada have a much better understanding of this. So I don't know. Maybe there's something going on there that just would be known to me if I were a citizen. So if she's talking about something that's literally true that I just have no awareness of, by all means. But at the same time, even if I might think that's the case, I wouldn't assume that that is the case in every instance of coming up against someone or interviewing someone who just happens to have a name that is not, Anglican, for lack of a better phrase. So maybe that's just me. Maybe I want to learn about the person, or learn as much about the person as they feel comfortable revealing insofar as a job interview. I don't need to know everything about them, right? It just...
I think that they give up their education.
Well, they give up their education? How? Like, they show up in Canada and some of their minds are wiped? What are you guys, like MIBs or something?
And their certifications, and they just give up a lot.
So what? Someone certified in another country suddenly is not of a level to be certified when they get to Canada? That doesn't matter anymore? I mean, granted, I don't know what certifications you're talking about. I don't know if they transfer country to country. But if I'm an expert brain surgeon certified in India and I come to Canada, I'm still a certified brain surgeon. Like, what? Okay, again, like I say, maybe there's something specifically Canadian about this that she's referring to that I'm just unaware of, being a stupid American, but I don't know.
Often their language. I think that they give up their education and their certifications, and they just give up a lot. And so I think it's really important that we be using candidates' real names.
Unless on the resume they put an alternative that they're comfortable with, in which case I would ask them, which is the common courtesy in the Western world, do you prefer Mike or Muhammad? It's a polite thing to ask, like the whole pronouns thing. Yeah, it's kind of similar to that. Or if I say, it's nice to meet you, Elizabeth, and they say, oh, just call me Liz. Okay, I've just learned something, and I'll call them Liz. It's just courtesy. And if the guy had put Muhammad Smith on his resume and had no Mike in brackets, what do you think I would have called this person when they got in the room? What are you talking about?
If it's on the resume, then that means that it's actually something that they have a comfort level with. Okay,
then I would call him Mike. So why wouldn't I call him Mike? What you just you just wholly contradicted yourself. You implored me to use Muhammad instead of Mike, use his real name. And yet just now you say, well, if they put it on the resume, then they must be comfortable with it. So let's embrace that and use it. No, I can't use Mike. I have to call him Muhammad. You just told me I'm not allowed to call him Mike. What?
So let's embrace that and use it. I do think that employers, in terms of wanting to create a diverse environment, have to remember inclusion comes along with that. Nothing
you have said so far has put the fault onto the employer for using an incorrect name, air quotes. Your first and premier example was a resume with both options available, as put there by the potential employee. Thank you again, Mike R. This woman is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I don't know about that, but she's trying to make a point, but I guess very badly. I mean, what name do you prefer, right? Like, okay, let's say, all right, so let's say someone sits down and on the resume it says Michael, right? Okay. And I say, it's nice to meet you, Michael. Do you prefer Mike or Michael? Or do you prefer Michael or Mike? Just to find out, because maybe someone has a preference that's not their official name. Or again, like I said, Elizabeth, Liz, Beth, whatever. Okay. Let's say Muhammad sits down, right? Now, I have known several people named Muhammad that preferred to be called Mo, or ended up being called Mo by their friends and family, and they had no problem with it. So if someone sits down and says, I'm Muhammad, I say, do you prefer Muhammad or Mo? Something like that. I do the same thing as a courtesy. Do they care about having their real name being said? Is there a shortened version that I'm familiar with as a sort of, more familiar, more comfortable one? It's just common courtesy. Or you can do it not at all and just use whatever's on the resume and just move forward from that. And if they have a preference, maybe they'll tell you. Either way, what are you talking about? Use their proper name. If you said, "Oh, this employee comes in, his name's Muhammad," and you said, "Well, I don't know, hey Joe," or something, like, I don't even know.
Right? And so it's not just about diversity.
If it's not about diversity, then why are we here? Why are we talking about this? You just said it was all about diversity. What?
It's not just about building a work environment that is diverse. It's about making sure that when those people show up at work.
Those people? Now, you've talked a lot about language and word choice. You want to rethink that one a little bit? I just watched The Irishman, on Netflix. By the way, that movie is both really neat to watch and also kind of comical when you see elderly men with their faces CGI'd to look younger, and they're trying to do active things that younger men would do, and they look really awkward doing it. I mean, the performances are good. It's still a weird thing to watch. But there's a whole scene in which Jimmy Hoffa refers to an Italian guy as "you people," and it becomes this huge plot point. So I just have an unconscious bias now in noticing that kind of language.
Inclusion comes along with that, right? And so it's not just about diversity. It's not just about building a work environment that is diverse. It's about making sure that when those people show up at work, that they belong there as well.
By using the name that they themselves put on the resume, it's sort of like restorative justice. You just start talking about the result without thinking about how you get there, right? Like, we're going to put the offender and the victim in the same room. Okay, well, how do you determine who the offender is? Let's just ignore the whole part of due process. Like in this case, let's just ignore having actually spoken to this person before they joined the workforce and sort of gotten to know them, at least on a workable cursory level. Like, okay.
And one of the easiest ways to do that is to call them by their original name.
Well, why wouldn't I? Do you have an example where someone was not called by their original name? Like what are you talking about? Like, I mean, if you had said the name on the resume was Muhammad Smith, and you just decided to refer to them by Mike because it's easier for you without them having any input, okay, now that might be a silly, but at least a functional example of what you're talking about. If I decide to give somebody a nickname out of the blue, that might be kind of rude. I will give you that. Okay? That would seem unmannerly to me. But that's not what you said. You said that they themselves offered up the alternative. So...
And if you have any questions, obviously, you can ask them, what's your preference?
Really? I can ask somebody what they prefer? I can ask them if they have... Seriously, lady? Come on. Come on. This is exactly what I was just talking about.
Preference. What name? You've got two names on your resume here. Which one?
Exactly. Hi, it's nice to meet you, Muhammad. Or I see on your resume, do you prefer Mike? That's the polite thing to do. If they don't care which one is used, then it doesn't matter. If they say, yeah, I kind of like Mike. Okay, I'll call you Mike. What? Does this need to be said? Does this need to be explained? I mean, I suppose there are people out there that just have absolutely no interpersonal skills whatsoever, but really?
Which one do you want me to be using?
Yeah, exactly. Which is my first immediate reaction when you described the resume.
So I think it's really, really important that through the recruitment process, we are demonstrating respect and creating an environment and a perception and a priority in terms of inclusion. So just my little PSA for today in terms of building a workplace that is diverse and inclusive. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, sign up for our newsletter. And if you have any questions at all, please email me directly, Christina@praxisrecruitment.ca. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Guess what, everybody? It is a good idea to call people by their names. Ta-da! You know what? Forget the maple syrup company. I've talked about this before. I'm going to hang out a shingle as a recruitment consultant, as a diversity and diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant for businesses. I mean, if that's the kind of advice that's going to get me a paycheck, heck, man, I'll be on Easy Street in a week. Thank you, Andrew Joyner. Half the people I work with are minorities, and this is never an issue. Almost like she is making issues out of thin air. Yeah, just a little bit. Just a little bit. Now, again, if she had started off with saying something to the effect of, I worked in a company, right, and this one employer would give people cute nicknames or things that they thought were cute without the employees having any input. Okay. And that made it kind of uncomfortable for some people who didn't want to rock the boat by saying anything, but also didn't quite enjoy having a pet name from the employer. Okay, now if she brought up if she brought up an example like that, whether it was anecdotal to her own life or even hypothetical, I could have accepted that as, yeah, that's probably not a smart thing to do. You know, at least reflexively. It all depends on the work environment, how you know people. But if that's your knee-jerk reaction to interacting with your employees, probably not very professional. I could accept that. And a piece of advice is, until someone gives you permission elsewise or indicates otherwise, just use their name. I'll be like, okay. And that's about a 2-minute video. We're not talking about rocket science there. But that would be an acceptable example of something you want to try to avoid. I mean, it's like you could say, maybe you think you're just trying to get to know your employees and kind of joke around and get, and feel like a more sort of fun environment. But some people might not enjoy that. So instead, I'm like, okay, sounds like stupid advice, but I could see it's something has happened before. I've experienced that before. People giving people cute nicknames or something. Usually it's based off of something that they've done, like someone who answers the phone real quick or whatever. Somebody called her Speedy. And everybody's called her Speed after a while. And that was just what it is. And it was a cute little thing. Not a big deal. And if she had a problem with it, she never said. She seemed to enjoy it, and that's just how it was. That I could see. That's not what she said. That is nothing of what she said. She didn't. That's what I'm saying is like, if that's the quality level of advice necessary to become a recruitment consultant for businesses and make a business out of it, man, I could be on Easy Street here. Okay. So we're coming up on the last video. That was 2 of 3. And just about good time here because should be finished up by the time this is done. Okay, now this last one is like 11 minutes long. And I only know what it's about because of the title. And this is why I thought it was important to at least make sure everybody knows we're talking about Canada. And I read the Canadian law at the top. Because now she's going to be talking about recruiting Indigenous people. Now, this is where, being an American, I don't know all the intricacies. Maybe she'll tell us why that requires a special category of consideration. So let's find out.
Hello from Praxis Recruitment. I'm Christina Stewart.
Okay, now the audio quality on this one is obviously different than the other two. I did my best to boost it and clean it up a bit. Thankfully, there are subtitles, so even if you're not that jazzed with the sound quality, there's a guide, but just to let you know.
Today, I want to talk to employers about ways to incorporate, to attract, and to recruit Indigenous people into your workforce. This is a question I've actually been asked twice in the last week. So I thought, well, let's make a video and address this.
Okay, so you want to recruit people specifically on the basis of their ethnicity? I mean, you're describing a targeted effort to recruit a specific ethnic demographic into your employee workforce. Okay.
So now, first of all, I want to acknowledge that I'm not an expert. I am not Indigenous.
Oh, okay, if you say so.
Certainly, I'm an expert in recruitment, and I'm an expert in recruiting in remote and rural locations around the province, which means that we do work with Indigenous communities in Indigenous communities, and we work with employers to make sure that their workforce represents the community in which they're working.
There is that, again, I know I keep pausing on that particular notion, but that is something that is a notion I have heard since my very first video covering a company's DEI or diversity program. If you go to my channel and on my playlists and you find the playlist called Diversity Imperative, the very first video on there has the guy talking about making the workforce reflect the community in which they work or whatever. And even back then, I made the exact same point when I was just starting out doing this stuff. I was like, well, in order to actually achieve that goal, wouldn't you have to recruit on the basis of quotas? So anyway, that question still remains to this day. And I don't know how you get around that if that is your goal.
So I certainly come from that lens, but I want to make sure that I'm being very clear that there are Indigenous folks out there who are doing great work that could be supporting this process as well.
What? Are you complaining? I'm okay.
So now the second thing that I want to say is that I so appreciate this question.
Uh-huh.
I appreciate this question because
You appreciate this question. Well, I can appreciate a question as a question. That doesn't mean anything.
Means that employers, you are on a quest to diversify.
Yes. Define a diverse candidate. So an Indigenous person, before any other consideration, is automatically a diverse candidate? Is that it?
And I think that this is such an opportunity. There are about 300,000 First Nation individuals within the province of BC. So that is, Indigenous. So that's First Nation, that's Inuit, and that's Métis. So Indigenous people within the province. So
yeah, okay. And so
what you want to make sure is that your workforce is actually reflective of the community in which you're working.
You've said that like twice now in this video and in previous. I would honestly like to know how you achieve that goal. Like on the ground, in the weeds, what you do behind the scenes first and foremost to set up a plan to achieve that goal. No matter what environment, community, or whatever you're working in. If the goal is the workforce must reflect the community in which the business is operating, what procedures and what steps do you take to achieve that goal specifically? I would love to hear what that entails. I have no faith that I will, though.
And for many of us in the province of BC and elsewhere in North America, but definitely in BC, that means incorporating and ensuring that your workforce employs Indigenous folks.
Okay, if I'm going to ensure that my workforce employs Indigenous folks, what method must I use in my hiring decisions, do you think? Shall we just refresh ourselves real quick? Okay. All right. That all individuals should have an opportunity equal with other individuals to make for themselves the lives that they are able and wish to have, and to have their needs accommodated consistent with their duties and obligations as members of society without being hindered or prevented from doing so by discriminatory practices based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, marital status, family status, genetic characteristics, disability, or conviction for an offense of which a pardon has been granted or in respect of which a record suspension has been ordered. So, what would you have to do in order to ensure you employ Indigenous folks? Who would you have to deny opportunities to in order that you employ Indigenous folks? Just asking.
And so I think, now don't quote me on this, I think there's 166 different First Nations throughout the province of BC, and every single one of them is unique. But in those 166 different First Nations, that is a massive labor pool. And so we want to make sure it just makes sense that we're looking to First Nation communities, to Indigenous people, to ensure that our workforce is fully functioning and diversified, right?
Yeah, it sounds great. It sounds great. Okay, so tell me, since apparently this is the focus of the video, how you do this. What do you do, or what do you recommend businesses do to ensure that they are hiring Indigenous people in order to make their workforce diverse inherently?
Right. And reflective of the community in which you're working.
Yeah, number 3.
So, going back to those 166 different First Nations,
yes,
you need to look at them.
Uh-huh.
And you need to look at you in order to expand and ensure that you are attracting Indigenous people into your work environment.
Okay, setting aside for a moment that in her talking about these 166 different groups, as though they themselves are then monoliths in relation to the individuals that make up that group, as though knowing something about one of these groups inherently tells me something about the work capability or value as an employee an individual is going to have. Setting that aside, all right, what specifically do I do as an employer to attract Indigenous people to my work environment? What are the things necessary to do that? As Indigenous people are, I don't know. What do you recommend?
And so one thing that the place where we need to start as non-Indigenous people who are looking to hire.
What if I'm an Indigenous person looking to hire, but I'm not from one of the other 165 different, groups or tribes or whatever? Well, don't I have to take something else into consideration then too, if it's so specific? Okay, never mind. All right, you're a non-Indigenous employer looking to hire Indigenous people. What am I attracting them with?
Is we need to take a step back and remember that there are massive barriers for Indigenous people entering into our jobs, into workforces that aren't necessarily Indigenous, that aren't Indigenous.
Okay, again, this is where the cultural rift comes up again. I'm not Canadian. What kind of barriers are you talking about? And
we need to remember that those barriers come from this place of this history of trauma. And we need to remember that there has been, and there still is, a stigma attached to what an Indigenous employee might look like.
Isn't that the entire point? Or, okay, again, I don't know, but if I were to say, hey, I'm an employer and I'm going to follow the law, to the best of my ability, follow the law and adhere to the principle of don't judge a book by its cover, let's say, and I'll put the job posting up for anybody to apply to. And if they're Indigenous, great. If they're not, whatever, I'm looking for someone who can do the job, and I'm going to set aside the aesthetics. What's wrong with that? But, okay, are you going to detail? And again, if this is just stuff that is just reflexively known by Canadians, I'm trying to imagine she's not saying I should look at every Indigenous person as an inherent victim when they come applying for a job at my company. I'm hoping that's not what she's saying. That's what it sounds like she's saying.
And so looking through the lens of that Indigenous person,
how can I possibly assume to know the perspective of another person based on their ethnicity? Unless I'm employing a particular philosophy in life, that many people would find problematic?
They aren't necessarily going to be putting their hand up and saying, yeah, hire me.
Why not? Why? What am I to assume about the attitude and philosophy of Indigenous people right out of hand? Instead of considering them individually as individuals, what beliefs am I supposed to, possess ahead of time about Indigenous people? You're going to have to tell me.
They are potentially not going to trust you, right?
Right? I don't know. Are all Indigenous people inherently xenophobic? Should I assume that to be the case of any Indigenous person I come across? I mean, maybe, I don't know. I'm not Canadian. Maybe they are. Is that how I should assume to know the attitudes and perspectives of people based on their ethnicity? Tell me more.
They are wondering if you think that stigma exists, that there's stereotypes there, that you believe what your biases are.
What did you just say? Unless you're talking like sarcastically or something, what did you just say that I, as the employer, need to assume about the attitude of anybody coming towards my place of business as an Indigenous person? You are the one who is galvanizing the idea that there is a certain way I should be thinking about people based on their ethnicity before I've even met the individual here. You just did that. So if they're afraid that I'm employing some kind of stereotypes against them before they've even met me, well, in your world, the answer would be yes, wouldn't it?
Is there racism? Because this is the lens through which they have applied in the past, perhaps, and been stereotyped.
You mean like I should assume that they have barriers, that they're going to be unwilling to raise their hand, that they're going to be inherently untrusting of me? You mean those kind of stereotypes? Stereotypes based on someone's ethnicity? Gosh, what do you call that? What do you call it when you assume to know the character, perspective, thoughts, etc. of someone based on their race? Gosh, what is that word?
Or have experienced racism.
Well, looks like they just might again if they come to a company advised by you.
And so we need to remember as non-Indigenous leaders that the lens through which Indigenous people are looking at our workforce is very different from the way that maybe we think of it.
Are you even listening to yourself right now? I need to assume that someone who is Indigenous has a specific perspective and is hesitant and is scared and is untrusting. And I have to take the savior role of like, no, they're there. You can trust us. Okay. All right. Well, let's just stipulate this for the moment. Let's say that everything you just said is perfectly reasonable. In that case, what exactly can I do as an employer to attract these obviously traumatized and untrusting people?
And so that brings me to the second point, is that we need to make sure that we're looking at our own processes. So yeah, we need to be looking at them.
Like?
But we also definitely need to be looking at our own system.
Systems and processes are synonymous. You've said the same thing twice.
Our own processes and dismantle them.
What are you talking about? Like, dismantle what? All right. How does this serve the goal of attracting specifically Indigenous people?
If there is any hint of racism or any edges that an Indigenous applicant might trip over.
Any hint of racism? Yeah, gosh, is there any hint of racism in thinking, we got to prepare, guys. All right. Okay. So we want to attract some Indigenous people. Okay. Now, obviously, they don't think the same as we do. Okay. So we're going to have to, before they even show up at the door, we need to dismantle our processes, because obviously those processes can't apply to those people. Are you even listening to yourself right now? I'm sorry. I'm not trying to manufacture some outrage here, but this is just, setting aside the sort of going fully against my personal principles kind of thing, just the absolute cognitive dissonance on display here. Saying one thing while at the exact same time promoting the opposite. Wow.
And so I want to actually share a story of mine.
Oh, okay. I'm happy to finally have an example, even if it's anecdotal.
So we do work with, as I mentioned, some First Nation organizations, as well as we work in remote and rural communities around the province. And so last year, there was work that was available in a very small community that was predominantly, I want to say, not 100%, but predominantly, it was First Nation community. And so what we did was we actually went there. So we held a little job fair. We went and we set up a little table in the community room at the public health office in this First Nation community area.
Okay, well, if I am to assume to be true what you've just told me about Indigenous people, it must have been a very unproductive and almost adversarial time, right?
And we made sure that the band office knew that we were coming, of course, and they let everyone know. And we asked people to just come and meet us. And so throughout that day, we worked, met with all kinds of people who were really interested in potentially taking on some of this work that was to come.
Really? That doesn't sound like the kinds of people you were describing a moment ago that I was supposed to assume as an employer to know their attitudes. Is there a twist coming?
And so when we asked them to give us their information, right? Normally we would be asking for a resume, but in this case, we simply just asked for, kind of name and contact information. And so we could remember them and then reach out again when everything got going.
Why did you treat them differently than you would any other potential applicant? Why did you change your policy? I mean, maybe there's a reason. I'm not being facetious here, okay? Maybe there is a reason. If you could articulate the reason why you changed that policy specifically for this demographic and give me a good reason, maybe there is one. I don't know. But until you do, I don't get it.
And I think I know the vast majority wrote down their name.
Yeah.
And they wrote down the band office phone number because they first of all, didn't have a resume. And it's not because they were, lazy or uninterested.
Or maybe it's because you didn't ask for one.
Let's be really, really clear on that.
Well, okay, I'll accept that. I wouldn't have assumed that. It's interesting that you dropped that, but okay. If you did not require a resume, why would they have brought a resume?
It's simply that there was no need before. There's no work there before.
What? Well, hey, here's a thought. Here's something. You know what? Here is an idea. Okay. Let's say you're absolutely right. Okay. Let's say you're absolutely right, that you're going into a community where employment is in the basement, right? And it has been that way for a long time. While you're going there recruiting, here's a thought. I know this is a tough one. If you wanted to do a service that people could elect to take advantage of, why don't you have a resume building workshop? Huh? What about that? Right? If you're going into a community that's, you believe or you have evidence, I don't know, has never had to have a resume before, and you're offering job opportunities and such, why not have a resume workshop there to teach them how? And those that already have one or know how to make one, great. They come in, great. If you don't, hey, if you're available in an hour, we're going to have some people over here to help you build your resume, and then you can turn that over to us, and then we'll have something to work with. How about that? Accept resumes if you have them. Teach people to build a resume if they don't, and then accept their resume. So ultimately, you're treating everybody the same. What about that idea? Is that so far afield here?
And so this meant that we had to go there. We had to meet them. We had to come directly to them in order for them to trust that this existed.
Okay. I'll accept that. Sure.
And also in order for them to be able to connect with us and share that information, just their name and phone number.
Why lower the bar of expectation? Why not have them apply like everybody else? Teach them how to make a resume or direct them to where they can make a resume and then have them submit it. Obviously, you've shown up physically so they know this isn't a joke, and then treat them like everybody else.
And then second, the phone number was the band office because these individuals didn't even have phones. So when we're looking to our own processes and, if I'm looking to fill those roles and I just throw an ad on Indeed and then hope that people apply, I am limiting and cutting out that entire demographic.
Yes, I get it. Yeah, I understand. And actually, she's describing specifically the kind of recruiting that I assume is taking place in order to achieve diversity while also dodging certain liability or legal entanglements. Because if you advertise jobs to a specific demographic while not advertising them as much to other demographics, then your talent pool you're going to bring in for eventual hire is obviously more likely going to be made up of the demographic you're looking to add or, bolster in your own workforce. Because if you, it's hard to get sued by someone that was never involved in the hiring process to begin with to know that they were discriminated against if you're only recruiting from specific demographics. That's kind of how I've come to it here, come to understand the methods that must be employed to achieve the ends that are being described. But, okay, yes, if your goal is to get more employees from a specific demographic, then yes, you're going to have to go to the places where they are and let them know that jobs exist so that your chances of having that demographic end up in your workforce increase. Yes.
That entire demographic of people. My light just went out.
Yeah, I saw that. That's great. So the demographic is what matters. Notice how you've said nothing about skills, talents, etc. You are concerned first and foremost with the aesthetic, the bragging rights, more or less.
Anyhow, so that I want to make sure that now obviously that's an extreme example. But
is that an extreme example? That sounds pretty par for the course if that's what you're aiming for.
I want you to be thinking at it through that lens, right? Through that lens of what limiting barriers am I putting in place that are also going to compound the barriers that these Indigenous people are already facing as far as trust goes. Now my light's back on again, right? So think about your ads. Think about the way that you word your ads. Are you asking for resumes for entry-level roles that maybe don't require them? So that's a really good place to start.
Shouldn't I consider that just for the roles in general and not just for a specific demographic? I mean, am I changing the rules based on the assumptions I have about a specific demographic, or am I just conducting business fairly in an equal opportunity philosophy? Because what you're talking about right now is making special rules for people on the basis of their demographic. You're assuming to know the quality of their life, etc. Right? I mean, and maybe it's true. Maybe not everybody in this town or this place you're going to has a phone. Okay, acceptable. Right? Is there somewhere I can leave a message? You have to make accommodations for the person, right? There's no problem with that, but I have to assume these things ahead of time. I have to think that they're... Okay, I'm just repeating myself now.
The second area that I really want to focus on today is in talking about going to the First Nation. So now I live and I work and I play on the traditional unceded territory of the Sechelt Nation.
Really? Why? Why are you trespassing? Why don't you leave? You play on the unceded territory of the Sechelt Nation. You're not Indigenous. What are you doing there? You're celebrating on stolen land? Okay.
If I cross the street, I'm in the homeland of the Squamish people.
Oh, okay. So why? Why are you there? Do you pay them taxes? Do you pay them rent? Okay.
And so if I'm looking to hire and I want to hire Indigenous folks, I'm going to go straight to the Sechelt Nation and straight to the Squamish Nation. Generally, First Nation organizations, the company, right, the business attached to them, have a training and development and employment officer who, that's their job, is to ensure that their members, their community members, are employed.
Right. So a tribal office has the responsibility and the duty to see to the betterment of the people who are belonging to the tribe. Wow, that's amazing. I can't believe it. So what is to be the process by which I, as an employer, go through in hiring people? Do I put the job out just to the tribes? I mean, if the work is involved locally, then maybe, but that's not what you've been talking about.
And so that means sometimes ensuring that they get the training that they need, and then also trying to connect them with employers that are local.
Yeah, that sounds like what that entity would be doing. What? So it's, if you don't know who your training or development or employment or whatever they want to call them, officer is in the First Nation that's local to you, that is the first place that you should start for a couple of reasons. Is the first reason that my goal is to recruit people on the basis of their ethnicity, so I'm going to go to the tribal office that's going to help with that? I mean, that is the primary goal here, right? It's like, I'm looking for someone who looks like this or has this ethnicity. Other considerations are secondary. First and foremost, I want to have a racial, ethnic filter to my hiring process. I mean, that is what this is all about, right?
Number one, they may know somebody. If you're looking for an entry-level accountant or a senior accountant, or if you're looking for a marketing person or whatever, heavy-duty equipment operator, you name it, that training and development officer that works for that First Nation is going to know who in their membership has the skills and education and ability and interest in taking that job on.
Yes, if you go to an organization that is specifically geared toward finding employment for a specific demographic of people, and again, your first consideration isn't the skills necessary, because if it was, why would you only first go to an entity that is there to find employment for a specific demographic? Your first filter is demographic. Your first filter is ethnicity. It's race. The principle that all individuals should have an opportunity equal with other individuals to make themselves the lives that they are able to and wish to have, and to have their needs accommodated, without being hindered or prevented from doing so by discriminatory practices based on race, national or ethnic origin, etc. Just want to remind, I'm not an expert in Canadian law, but that sounds pretty clear cut to me. But okay, you keep advising to first and foremost put up an ethnic filter on hiring practices.
So they're an excellent resource to connect you directly with people, directly with applicants. The second piece is that person can help you to post the job. Often there are newsletters that are circulated throughout the community membership.
Yes.
You could very easily ask and get your job posting into the newsletter or post it on an actual job board at the First Nation.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a great way there to make sure that you're hitting all of the First Nations directly. So take a look at what your ads look like before you do that.
Oh yeah, make sure your ads have neutral language. You want to make the ad and job posting neutral while you're only displaying it to a demographic that is anything other than neutral in decision. Right. Equal opportunity, right?
And make sure that they're inclusive and that there isn't any language in there that somebody might trip over that has an edge or is racist, point blank.
Yeah, okay. Well, hell, given the fact that, I'll just assume the employer role again for a second. Given the fact that I'm not a First Nations individual, and obviously Indigenous people living in Canada have a wholly different perspective on the world and don't think the same way I do, how could I possibly know what language I could or could not use that they might detect as having an edge or being point blank racist? I mean, what should I do to solve that problem? Since obviously those people, as you said earlier, think differently. Good gravy.
Right?
Right.
And then take it directly to the community. Okay?
Yeah.
So I want you to remember, that there is a lack of trust.
Right. Indigenous people do not trust outsiders. Got it.
That there's barriers that exist that have been in place for a very long time. Right.
So I have to consider them as immediately and inherently disadvantaged. Got it. Okay. So untrusting, disadvantaged. Right. Okay. What else should I already assume to know about someone who is First Nations in Canada?
Embedded in the history of the Indigenous people and their perspective of how they've been treated, and there's a bit of a trust issue at times. At times?
Well, over what? How often should I assume this trust issue? What? Maybe I just put the job opening out there and whoever applies. And I look past anything dealing with their ethnicity and just look at their value on a meritorious basis. What about that? Is that so difficult? And not assume to know the quality of their lives, their perspectives, their temperaments beforehand?
So I really want you to remember that.
Okay.
So
again, okay. Maybe just as this idealistic Yankee, I'm just completely off base here. Those of you in my audience who are Canadian, maybe you know different. Maybe I'm the goofball here. I don't know. But, when I think about terms like bias and racism and discrimination, this does not sound like good advice if you're trying to avoid those things. Now, thank you, Sora Luna. Many businesses and schools will have a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that we are on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of X. No, I get it. I understand that they do that. I've always found it a little bizarre, just in the sense of, well, I always think of the image of I jump over a fence that says no trespassing on it, and I stand on this piece of land that I've now jumped over the fence of, and I just say, I acknowledge I'm on the land of Joe Smith. I'm now going to eat my lunch. Like that's the image I have in my head when that sort of declaration is made. Like, okay, so why are you there? It just seems bizarre to me, right? It just seems bizarre. And how many times have different tribes conquered the land of other tribes? I mean, if you go back in every layer of the onion, how many acknowledgments do you have to make to cover all the bases? It just, I don't know. It's a weird tradition to me. That's all.
Hopefully this has been helpful. I want you to remember also that National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, September 30th. Make sure you've got your orange shirt. Make sure that you've got something planned in your workforce. I know that some businesses are planning on closing, and don't feel that you have to do that. That can be very expensive.
You don't say.
But I want to make sure that you're doing something. You want to make sure that you're taking action, that you're acknowledging what the day is. It's not a holiday. It's a day for truth and reconciliation. And so all of us have the power to take action toward what that reconciliation is.
I mean, in some instances, I kind of get that. In other instances, I feel like it's a prolonged, self-imposed guilt trip. But I don't know.
So keep the awesome questions coming. I hope today has been incredibly helpful. Please let me know if you've got any follow-up or any other questions around this really, really important topic. Thanks for asking, and I'll see you next time.
And there you go. That's a 3-part triple feature from Praxis Recruitment. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what I expected. Obviously, there was a bit of Canadian flavor there insofar as the demographic she was talking about, but it sounds very similar to many other diversity, equity, inclusion, et cetera, consultants and programs that I've looked at in the past. But I was just curious to find out, like, if there were any specific considerations that were of a Canadian nature there. And I guess there were, at least from her perspective, which is obviously a perspective that no one else could possibly have except her family and friends who have the exact same perspective and value system and interests, because, obviously they do. You can just tell by looking at her. Sorry. I'm being a little sarcastic there. Okay. I don't have much else to say that I haven't already said. I'll go to the chat real quick and see if you guys have anything you'd like to add. Mr. Tickle Trunk, land acknowledgements are cringe. Either you think you should be on the land or you should leave that land. Anything else is hypocrisy. It is a bit odd, Coolidge, and we're not giving it back is the unspoken part. That's, it seems like one of those things. It's like I'm being really friendly while I'm doing something that is not good. It's just like, yeah, no, I get this is your property, but I'm going to eat my sandwich now. Sora Luna, it's the new virtue signaling. It's been going on for years now. As soon as I started hearing it, I was like, what exactly are you saying here? Like, if you're making a declaration of ownership, then you probably shouldn't be living here if you actually believe in what you're saying, right? I mean, how much respect are you showing a tribe or a group or whatever else if you're just happily occupying land that you are saying is theirs? What is the point of that? Let's see. What else do we have? Mr. Tickle Trunk, truth and reconciliation happened already. How do you mean? I mean, whenever I hear that phrase, I always first think of the South Africa post-apartheid. That's the first time I ever heard that phrase used the way in reference to that kind of stuff. It's also one of the prime examples of an attempt at restorative justice that I've come back to a couple of times. And as far as I understand it, the truth and reconciliation process in South Africa left most people unsatisfied because, like most restorative justice, it basically, on the temporal plane, lets the bad actors off the hook. Thank you, Mike R. Unrelated. Any plans on doing another audience-suggested TED Excellence? Yeah, you brought this up, I think, last week, too. Not so. There are plans floating out there right now that a fellow YouTuber, who I won't name because I don't want to spoil the surprise or anything, is thinking about choosing a TED Excellence for themselves and myself to watch together, and that I am at their mercy for the most part as to whatever we will watch. So that's floating out there right now. As far as a planned audience participation one, I don't have one planned right now. I could cook one up pretty quick. It's not exactly difficult. So I'm kind of waiting to see if my fellow YouTuber is going to unleash upon me something either this week or it's very nebulous. So I'm kind of waiting on that before I start another game of it. So trust me, it's going to happen. I just don't know if it's going to happen in the next 2 weeks or so. So just bear with me. It's still in my mind. It will happen again. But thank you, Mycar. Like I said, I'm being cagey about it because I don't want to give it away. But it's just. Let's see. Exhumed Legume. Every time I hear Truth and Reconciliation, I think of that Covenant cruiser from Halo. You've got one on me. I don't play Halo. I know. Although I do know the TV show had nothing to do with Halo. I heard that enough from the people that I trust to know Halo. Okay. Any particular reason to tag me in it? Tag you in what? What? Oh, Kiever, you're talking to Kiever Dam. Okay. Yeah, Kiever Dam let me know that you'd asked that the last show, and I didn't have a way to contact you directly, and I didn't know if she was... Anyway. Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. Sora Luna. Also, we have both leasehold and freehold land here in BC. Leasehold can be on traditional First Nation lands you lease for 99 years, and it reverts back to them. Not sure how it works, but doubt it ever will. Yeah, like I say, there's a whole bunch of like unspoken cultural facts that I just don't possess as an American for Canada. That may come into play in what she was talking about, but on its face, on the surface, it sounded like more, benevolently racist diatribe. Best I can put it. Anyway, everybody, I've already gone over time as I usually plan to, but I wanted to make sure I got through this. There you go. Another diversity, equity, and inclusion recruitment company. With the promotional videos, and that is a summary example of apparently the services that are offered and the philosophy behind it. So there we are. We're more informed than we were a minute ago, I suppose. But with that, everybody, I'm going to wrap this up. Programming note: tomorrow, Monday, I will have links out there once I have them. I don't have them right now. At noon Pacific time, or around noon, because the time hasn't been nailed down yet. Oh, thank you, Kiever Dam. Spud wants to know what kind of sandwich. What kind of sandwich am I eating on someone else's property? Oh, so it's going to be roast beef, ham, provolone, mayonnaise, shredded lettuce. That's important. Fresh tomato, a little bit of mustard, Dijon, hopefully, on wheat bread. There you go. Thank you, Kiever Dam, and thank you, Spud. But yeah, so tomorrow, noontime Pacific time on Monday, you have to look it up. It's on Christopher Moonlight Productions channel, or if you just search for the Quantum Dread live stream, the channel's attached. I don't have it in front of me. Tomorrow, I will be conceivably on a panel discussion about Stranger Things Season 4. Now that I've watched everything that's available so far until the next part comes out. So if you're interested in that, watch my Twitter. If nothing else, I'll have the links to that available when they come available to me. And then, as always, Thursday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern will be another episode of TED Excellence, where I'll look at another off-brand TED Talk, either chosen by me or, thrust upon me by my fellow YouTuber. We'll see. And then, as always, I think there's a Sunday coming up where I won't be here, but it's not next Sunday. No. But next Sunday, unless something else comes up, at the same time, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, the Sunday stream will return with another thing that I will watch and see and learn from, because that's what I do here. But either way, everybody, thank you so much for joining me on this beautiful Sunday morning. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all our sons command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land, glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Everyone, have a good rest of your Sunday. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Everybody who donated either to myself or to the GoFundMe's pinned at the top of the chat box, thank you so much for your generosity. I hope everybody is safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I will see you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.